Hello and welcome to the first panel of the day here at East Africa Com. I'm Paula Gilbert and I'm the editor of Connecting Africa. And for this panel discussion today, we are looking at the topic of behind the buzzwords. What does 4IR really mean for East Africans? Now, we all know that the Fourth Industrial Revolution represents a fundamental change in the way we live, work, and relate to one another. The innovative technologies that it brings are merging our physical, digital, and biological worlds in ways that create huge promise, but also potential problems. While emerging tech is enabling innovation and efficiency, there are also fears it could further widen the inequality gap in the developing world. 4IR is also driving a significant shift in the skills that will be required for the future workforce. So let's really get beyond the buzz and find out what kind of value the Fourth Industrial Revolution is bringing East Africa and what more can be done. So for that, I am joined by a star-studded panel today. So joining me, we have Evelyn Ngatia, who is the founder and CEO of Tekabot, Bhaskar Chakraborty, who is the Dean of Global Business at the Fletcher School at Tufts University, Vivian Dambia, who is the Director for Technical Services at the National Information Technology Authority in Uganda, and Isabella Milewska, who is the Global Digital Skills Leader at Amazon Web Services. So welcome, everyone. I'm very excited for what I expect is going to be a great discussion. If anyone in the audience has a question for our panelists, please put them into the chat feature on the right-hand side of the video, and we will answer them in the live Q&A after the discussion. So I'm going to jump in with some questions of my own. So Evelyn, I'm going to start with you. So obviously your whole business is formed around the Fourth Industrial Revolution and education around that. So maybe you can just set the scene for us in terms of where we stand in East Africa when it comes to 4IR.
Yes, thank you very much, Paula. When we look at 4IR and what, where exactly we are as East Africa, we're having the right conversations. I think that's a start, because even this conversation that's happening, we're seeing similar conversations happening across industries, across sectors. So that's a start in terms of the right conversations happening. We're also seeing, the early pioneers coming into the picture, I'll say startups, entrepreneurs, bringing in innovations, and we've seen that coming in. But the biggest thing, I think we're starting to see the early signs of the manifestation of this 4IR, when the larger corporates are also now making pivoting actually their business models. And we've seen Safaricom making that shift and announcing, moving from a telco company into a technology company. That transition is, they've announced that transition is going to happen. So we're starting to see the early signs of the manifestation of this 4IR. And, even from a regulator standpoint, those conversations are also happening. Policymakers are having, a part of the conversations. And obviously we have, policymakers as well as part of this forum having these discussions. So I think the right conversations are happening. We're starting to see the early signs of that, pioneers, capitalizing on the opportunities and bringing out innovations, as well as now the larger corporates also coming in and shifting their business models. So I think that's really where we are as East Africa.
Okay, great, thanks. And Vivian, I'm interested in your take on 4IR and how the National Information Technology Authority in Uganda is approaching it.
Thank you very much, Paula. The National Information Technology Authority is a government parastatal, and therefore we are doing this as the whole of government. So Uganda has taken this to a bit of another level. We've done a strategy for the implementation of 4IR. We have a national task force, of which I'm a member, where we are discussing how do we use these technologies to take us into the next revolution, in other words, in terms of the laws, what are the regulations? What are we looking in around in terms of good governance around, let's say, AI? What are the use cases in education, in agriculture? What is it that we are going to use these technologies for? We are still in the drafting stage of this strategy, and we hope it should be out disseminated this year. So we are definitely having a discussion around 4IR with the private sector. We've gotten everybody to come on board with academia. What is it we need to do to move us from where we are at to where we need to go, and exactly where do we want to go? Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Great to hear that there's so much happening already there. So, Isabella, obviously AWS has been using, what we call emerging tech like AI, machine learning for a long time. So I'm sure you've got a broad view of why 4R is so important for a region like East Africa.
Well, thank you for that question. And you're right. As Amazon Web Services, we're looking at the broader phenomenon, a global phenomenon, which is cloud computing, that is powering most of the technology innovation. So artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, Internet of Things, all that is powered by cloud computing. And with that, there's fundamental truth or fundamental sort of event that is happening around it, which is actually democratizing access to technology and democratizing across the board how organizations and individuals are making the most out of the fourth industrial revolution, which allows individuals and organizations really work from anywhere they want and perform the work for any employer they need to around the globe. And specifically in terms of the region of East Africa, I think in that context, the thought process and the prioritization and strategizing is no different than in any other part of the world. I've just read the other day that East Africa community has been working on aligning around development priorities. And it's very common for other parts of the world to look at human development, technology innovation, and decent jobs. And guess what? Cloud computing, being this democratizing power, can really contribute to that phenomenon, to that process that both education, training, jobs can be equally accessible to anybody around the world. And working together, we can make that happen in Kenya, in Uganda, or in Ethiopia at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. Bhaskar, I'm also interested, for your point of view is maybe a bit different sort of in academia. So if we're talking about skills, what are kind of the skills that you think are required and where are the big gaps?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to this fascinating discussion. I hope to learn more than I will contribute, I'm sure. In terms of skills, I reflect on a statistic that I saw, which is a Kenyan born today is likely to achieve at most 52% of their potential if they survive to adulthood. And that's a combination, reflects a combination of gaps in education, health systems, and other socioeconomic scaffolding that we typically, would hope a young person, would get in any part of the world. So what that means is that we need to think about the basic investments in education, digital skills, and of course, given our collective experience over the last 12 months, healthcare. And when we talk about fourth industrial revolution, there are a lot of exciting possibilities at the kind of the top of this edifice, but the foundations of the edifice are, if they are rickety, no matter what we do at the top, these foundations, specifically when we are talking about a continent as young as Africa, a part of Africa as young and potentially as talented as East Africa and in countries like Kenya, which are quite often brought up as almost like the North Stars of the region. Building skills and investing in the youth is an enormously important part of what I think about investments in policy, investments in basic infrastructure. And I'd like to make one more comment, which is, has to do with some of the basic infrastructure. One of the interesting things that we found in our analysis, in addition to the tremendous progress that East Africa, in particular Kenya, has made on so many aspects of digital penetration and use of digital applications, we still see a lot of gaps in terms of access. And so there's much more to talk about that. So I'll just kind of pause here.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could have a whole discussion just on that. But I think skills is kind of the major thing when we're talking about the fourth industrial revolution. So Evelyn, maybe let's talk a bit about 4IR literacy. Sort of what needs to be done to make sure that Africans are literate in these fourth industrial revolution technologies and can, take advantage of them.
Yeah. So I think in terms of literacy, a lot can be done. And how we look at it is for skills, they're strategic skills and they're technical skills. So the technical skills can sometimes be a little bit overwhelming because there's so many emerging technologies that are coming into play, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, the like. Now, when we look at strategic skills, then it gives us a broader view, a high-level understanding. So in an instance where you don't want to be an expert in these technologies, you can look at it from a high-level perspective, just basically understanding what the emerging technologies are, what the fourth industrial revolution is, and how it's going to impact your sector, for example, and every other sector of the economy. So we look at it in terms of the strategic skills sort of come first, and then you can make an informed decision as to whether you want to pursue technical skills, and especially which technical skills then that you want to specialize in. So in terms of literacy, I think where we need to start is the strategic skills, get an overview, get a high level understanding, then go deeper into the technical skills that you really want to pursue. But I say in terms of literacy, there's so many courses that are out there, online on-demand courses that are out there, providing some of these skills. So I think the first thing to start is, go online if you're looking for skills to enhance your skills as well. Just go online and see what skills you can get.
Okay, thanks. And Isabella, what do you think in particular for young people? What are the useful skills that we need to teach them for 4IR?
That is a very good question. And I think to your earlier point around the digital skills literacy, what I would say first is, well, today, just having digital literacy is far not enough to find a good job. 9 out of 10 jobs today are already requiring some level of digital skills. And these are not just those that dictate if you are able to use a computer, if you are able to use Office or browse through the internet. These are obvious aspects. What we need to do is definitely look out for some very specific and agile approaches towards delivering skills and also staying up to date, because the fact that you've taken one course or you've graduated from a university doesn't give you a guarantee that you're going to have a career for the rest of your life, right? So with that, the combination of technical but also professional skills is absolutely fundamental. And what I mean by that is learning about technology, getting acquainted with some technical aspects of how to code, which programming languages to use. That's one foundation to have. The second one is how do you collaborate with others? How do you communicate? How do you work in a complex environment? How do you cope with ambiguity? And on top of everything else, problem solving and critical thinking. All that are fundamental components of what we may define as already digital skills, because that's what you need in a workplace. What I would say is the way at AWS we design the learning pathways, the technical curriculum, it's actually already including both the technical and the professional skills part. And that's what I think is important and what will dictate the future, how we're going to learn and what kind of curricula is going to be taught in schools, at universities, in colleges.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So Vivian, I'm interested. It kind of sounds like we need a skills reboot of sorts. So who do you think is responsible for this? Is this a government issue? Is it a private sector issue? Is it for the academic institutions, or is it kind of a combination of everyone having to do their part?
Truly, it's a combination of everybody coming together to take on certain aspects of this. As governments, we like to think we know it all and we should be taking lead in everything. But in this case, I think putting the government at the forefront is not going to actually get us far. There are parts that the government needs to do, but there are bigger parts that academia, that private sector also needs to come together. We are going to need quite a lot of possibly funding that might not be available within the African governments to enable this. One of the things that we really need to look at is the reskilling of our teachers. You find that the teachers are so behind, and then they are expected to get out all these smart young children who are digitally enabled. And that part possibly needs to be looked at by all factors, or anybody who can come together, but led by government. And then the private sector could also help. He talked about infrastructure. It is, while we are talking about all these skills, the biggest problem with East Africa today is infrastructure. Because if these teachers, the schools, do not have access to this infrastructure, we are going to take a long time to get to where we are going. So there are different things that private sector and government could come together to do. Okay.
Yeah, for sure. That actually plays right into my next question. I was going to ask Bhaskar, because I think the pandemic really showed us how outdated some of our education systems are, and just what Vivian was saying about, the teachers themselves. So how do you think we modify the learning systems that we already have for the digital age?
Yeah, I think, we're still learning about how we learn. How we learn in the old-fashioned way and how we learn in this new remote hybrid modality. The experiences that we've seen across South Asia, many countries in sub-Saharan Africa and in Latin America is kind of pointing the way towards a new form of education systems. And I've looked at this issue most closely in India, and that might have some bearing on how one kind of looks at similar situations across East Africa, because many of the kind of the larger contexts are quite similar. So what we've seen in India is every school went remote, and much of the education that went into the rural populations and the peri-urban populations, came over a combination of your phone, primarily WhatsApp, and then television broadcasts and other forms of kind of messaging that traveled between the school, the community, and the family. And social media, in particular WhatsApp, was a very powerful way to communicate lessons and for the students to send their responses back. So we do see a potential for tapping a readily available set of platforms that was primarily used for social connectivity into a form of knowledge development and skill development. And I think this year's experience has taught us that you can not only channel the platforms, but you can also channel the human component of this. So what we learned was surveys that we did in India. Over 70% of those who were surveyed said that the community got involved in the education of the children. This is very different from pre-pandemic, where basically you sent your children off to school if they were going to school, and then the teachers took care of it, and the children came home, and that was about it. There was not much involvement by the parents or the community. And here, the parents, the family, the siblings, they all got involved. Of course, the challenge is so much of the populations across East Africa, you don't have a phone. You may have a phone, but the phone is shared among family members or shared across siblings. And when a parent, usually it's the father who leaves the house, the school leaves with them, because the phone leaves with them. So we have to deal with, coming back to the question of infrastructure, that fundamental infrastructure problem.
Yeah, the problem is there's so many different underlying things, and also like you can't talk about the whole of Africa, you can't talk about the whole of East Africa either, because each country has their own things, right? So Evelyn, I'm just interested in your view on, when we talk about sort of tertiary education, then are we providing the right courses that are sort of setting kids up for the future? Because I mean your business is running other courses, right, that they don't offer at universities.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see those courses, and there's a lot of courses, again, like I said, out there. But what we offer at TechAwat and 4IR Academy is really the strategic skills, because we feel that there's a gap between the technical skills and what people need to learn, that there needs to be sort of a bridge, where someone can come in and get high-level skills just to understand the whole landscape, because 4IR is going to impact every sector of the economy, whether you're in the medical field, manufacturing, name it, every sector is going to be impacted. So for us, we feel that strategic skills are very important. In terms of tertiary education and where exactly, where we are exactly, I think there's a lot that needs to be done. We've spoken about infrastructure. First, we need to have the relevant infrastructure, especially for even just public universities and the like. The hardware, the software, etc. Then again, just access to those courses that are being done, access to, I think mainly access to the courses, the technical skills. There's I would say a redesigning of the education system that needs to happen, so that then we can see more of these digital skills, all of them across the board, from strategic to technical skills, and then availing also the hardware as well, because I don't know if they have computer labs and how easily they can access the hardware that they need to, for this digital era. So I think a lot of, we're starting to see the courses coming into play into the system, but we need to see a lot more happening in terms of that area, in terms of universities and public universities more so.
Yeah. So Vivian, do you, in Uganda, is there sort of a discussion about redesigning courses for schools and for universities?
Yes, there is a discussion going on there. Actually, I think last year was when the curriculum for primary school was changed to sort of get it more into the digital area, the digital schools. And that's why I know that training the teachers is very important, because the curriculum was changed and the teachers were not trained. So it's a bit of a struggle there. So there's a lot of discussions going on there. Even with the new curriculum, there's many groups that are saying we still need to do more. We still need to change the curriculum a bit more to enable us to get our children ready for the fourth industrial revolution. So there's still a lot of work to be done, but also we have started on the journey.
Okay, that's great to hear. I'm going to change tacks a little bit now. So Isabella, I'm coming to you. I'm wondering, how do we sort of reframe this technology versus humanity kind of debate and get away from, that idea that the robots are stealing our jobs?
That is an interesting question. And I think obviously a lot can be said about the automation and digitalization of all the different industries. And according to the World Economic Forum recent report, apparently about 85 million jobs may be displaced due to automation, due to also the results of the pandemic. But guess what? Instead, there will be 95 million new jobs created. And that is something that tells you a lot about how actually automation impacts the job market landscape in general, which means that yes, there is a lot of automation going on thanks to the technology innovation that is being introduced, which means that humans may not need to do a lot of the repeatable, mundane tasks, and instead sort of uplift their abilities, their skills in order to embrace the jobs of tomorrow, which will require the critical thinking, the problem solving, really being able to use the technology to the human advantage. As opposed to just sort of complain that automation is sort of displacing a number of jobs, the jobs of yesterday, quite frankly. We should be thinking how to actually embrace that technology and really think about the innovation that can be brought with it. And what do we do in terms of education, in terms of training, in order to prepare communities, individuals, whole nations for it? And in that particular context, I think speed matters a lot. Speed, meaning what was discussed just a second ago around modernizing the education curriculum. So perhaps we should be thinking about the more agile, faster ways to create the talent that we need, to create the skill sets that we need. And for example, would be worthwhile to focus on the micro-credentials, the nano degrees that can be delivered to professionals much faster than becoming a student of 3 to 5 years at the university degree program. Not saying that this should be sort of replaced. I'm just challenge here the fact that we're debating over modernization of the education, but we should be taking into account that the innovation is happening at the unprecedented pace that has never taken place before, and really we should look at what can we do to make it agile and fast to the market.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. Bhaskar, what do you think about that? You know, coming from a university, what Isabella just said about maybe changing things completely?
Yeah, I think there's just so much that one can say about how digital transformation or just the penetration of digital technology is going to affect the future of work. Right. So before the pandemic, we were talking about automation, robotics, displacing the human beings. That is kind of, I would say, more of a Western developed world phenomenon. And from the perspective of East Africa, I believe the issues are quite different. Now, as you kind of go into the pandemic window, and then the question is, as we come out of it, how does work itself change? Of course, there is going to be a degree of automation that has already been baked into the value chains across many different industries, and some of that is going to remain because it promotes efficiencies. But to the point that was just made earlier, just while some jobs are going to go away, or some jobs are just going to change because people are going to work in a more dispersed and a remote environment, there are new jobs that are being enabled by digital technologies. Now, we've actually done a pretty systematic study of the kinds of jobs that could be generated through the use and application of digital. And these jobs are not necessarily, kind of the highest paid or the highest skills. So you can actually break it down into high-skilled, medium-skilled, and low-skilled jobs. And I'll give you an example of one of each. High-skilled job could be somebody who takes a series of courses with an organization like Andela, which then helps you become a coder, and you could get involved in become a freelance coder or a contract programmer for a multinational organization like Amazon or Microsoft or whatever, and you could move into the middle class by continuing to demonstrate your skills and work as a as either as a gig worker or as a contract worker or as a full-time employee. And this requires a fairly high level of skill in terms of using digital technology. Then there's a medium level of skill, which sadly the pandemic has sort of squashed that, hopefully temporarily. It's going to come back. A lot of that has to do with time sharing and capacity sharing services, whether it is Uber or other forms of human capital sharing capabilities that are being enabled by digital platforms. And finally, there's low-skill jobs, which are they don't pay much, but at least it provides employment to those who are currently unemployed, and that includes delivery services and a variety of other forms of participating in the logistics infrastructure of e-commerce that is beginning to take off in many parts of East Africa. So digital does add a variety of jobs across the spectrum.
Yeah, for sure. Some very good points there. I think we also have to obviously talk about the inequality factor. So Evelyn, I know that there's a fear that 4IR is going to sort of widen that inequality gap. So how do we make sure that we embrace it, but we don't let that happen?
I think you're very right. 4IR has actually the potential to widen the gap between the haves and the have-nots, because what's happening is, if you have an innovation or you're bringing in new technology, you need capital, you need financial capital, you need resources, you need strategic partners and all that. So most likely you'll find that the people who are going to thrive or take up these opportunities are the ones who can access financing, can access resources, strategic partners, etc. So what happens is that there's another section of the economy that is left behind, the ones who are not able to access that. So like the schools, the rural schools, or people in the rural areas, how do they also move forward in this 4IR? So that's a very good question. So I think we need to be intentional about it, and with 4IR comes in the aspect of we need to marry it with the Sustainable Development Goals, because that's a blueprint of bringing everyone, sort of lifting as we climb. So for us as Africa to actually move forward in this 4IR, we need everybody to move forward. So we can't leave anybody behind. So we really need to be very strategic, very intentional about it, partnering with the Sustainable Development Goals, seeing how using, like, say, for example, the platform economy. And I like one of the companies that has used this very well in Kenya, Twiga Foods, which is able to sort of, create a place or a marketplace where small-scale farmers can come into the platform and sell, their produce to a ready market. So in that way, they're also lifting the small-scale farmers in that sense. So, and we really need to look at the bigger picture. So it's not about if you're creating an enterprise today or a corporate or whatever it is, a business, you have to be strategic and having, the SDGs sort of ingrained into your business model. So it's not like a CSR project where you're saying, just to tick a box, on sustainability, but you have to be intentional about having that project ingrained, or having the SDGs ingrained into your business model. So and a good example is, I think there was a panelist, I think at last year's Africa Tech Festival, and they shared how, I think they were in the education space and they were offering online courses, and what the gentleman said is that they actually had a version of the same courses availed to universities. So if we have that model being ingrained, that such that if you're offering courses, then having a version of those courses availed to sort of the less fortunate. But then it's a whole play around, even as you're making those courses available to the less fortunate, do they have access to the hardware? Do they have access to the connectivity? And it reminds me about, the Giga project, the UN and I think private companies that are doing, in terms of mapping schools and ensuring that there's connectivity. That's the agenda, that connecting schools to the internet. And so we have to see such partnerships come in, which are very strategic, such that even when the courses are coming in, the infrastructure is laid, so that even the have-nots can actually access infrastructure or platforms or whatever the case is. So I think we have to be intentional about it in that sense, look at the bigger picture. Yeah,
I think that's a good way of looking at it, that you have to be intentional about everything, right? So Vivian, what's your view on that in terms of closing, that inequality gap using tech and not letting it go the other way around?
I mostly agree with her. We've got to use these technologies to, yes, uplift the are the less fortunate in the society. And for example, when we were looking at the strategy that we were building, we were looking at what is the bedrock of economic activity in, let's say, Uganda or East Africa, and it is smallholder farmers. What are the challenges that smallholder farmers face? Most of it is they cannot get their produce to the market, they cannot handle post-harvest issues, they do not know which pesticide to use for what. And we were thinking, well, this is a good opportunity to build a platform that can provide, and I am happy that Kenya has something to that effect, so that can provide the solutions that a smallholder farmer needs in one place. But of course, we still go back to the issue of access. How do they access this platform? How do we, when it comes to mobile phones, the numbers are actually growing, penetration is growing. So we can do a lot more to bridge that gap with these technologies. So basically, we need to look at the technologies as solving problems. What problems are existing in our society, and how can we use these technologies to actually solve those problems? And that is where government needs to come in to say, well, these are the problems, and how do we get the different partners together in one place to be able to solve these problems, and not leave it to just the private sector or to academia or to everybody. Let us all come together and figure out a way to solve these problems.
Yeah, for sure. And Isabella, how do we make sure that women in particular aren't left behind? Because unfortunately, when we talk about inequality, the gender gap is still a big issue in Africa.
I think this is a good question, and a very valid one in terms of driving diversity and inclusion all across the board. And I think that this key word has been mentioned, being intentional, right, about it. When you think about the partnerships that should be built and sustained between the governments, the academia, and the private sector, we really should be putting first those target groups that are most vulnerable, that are most underserved. And women still are certainly in one of the groups that are underserved and underrepresented, largely in the technology sector. And so with the programs that, for example, Amazon Web Services is running, we look at those communities that are really requiring specific needs. And when you think about programs, the training that you can provide, that the support, the coaching, the mentoring that you can provide, at the end of the spectrum, what you want to make sure is that the whole training program on or the coaching doesn't end just with completing that training or that particular program. It should lead to some job placement. It should lead to job outcomes. And that would be something that I would encourage when thinking about any specific programs to support women. I believe that with technology innovation, with digital transformation, in fact, I mentioned this before, it is really democratizing access to it and making everybody, regardless of social background or personal situation, equally being able to access it, obviously providing you've got the infrastructure and the devices to access internet, of course. But once you do that, in fact, there's no such a situation where it would be impossible. You don't need to sit in a classroom in order to learn all you need to know in order to pursue your career. So digital learning, online learning offers a lot of opportunities, but that's certainly not the only thing that can be offered. The coaching, the mentoring, and at the end of the day, really job outcomes, so that it feels that whatever your time is invested into, it will bear fruits at the end of the day.
Yeah, thanks so much. And then, Basco, maybe just sort of looking to the future, what are the strategies to make sure that tech delivers, real equitable economic development for a place like East Africa?
Great. Thank you for that question. And I think I'm going to build on the specific point of intervention and of technology that was triggered by Vivian's comment, which is the agricultural sector, because that is the sector where, if we can make a difference, it completely is a game changer. So let me put some numbers against it so that we can imagine how big can be. So according to the Business Commission for a Better World and Better Business, they did some analysis in terms of what can be the total new commercial value that can be unlocked by improving agricultural practices across the world and pursue the outcomes of the Sustainable Development Goals. Between now and 2030, and maybe a few more years beyond that, on an annual basis, we can unlock $2.3 trillion worth of value if we were to do the right thing. Of this, if we were to embed artificial intelligence, sensors, data analytics into farming practices, improve farming practices to precision farming, improve price discovery processes, and so on, you can add $250 billion a year worldwide. Out of $250 billion, about $190 billion are in the developing world. Out of that, $13.4 billion a year can be unlocked in East Africa. And out of that, $1.2 billion a year can be unlocked in Kenya. If we could embed artificial intelligence, data analytics, data availability into the agricultural sector across these regions. So that is the future that I think we need to strive towards. In order to unlock all of that, we need to solve for many of the issues that were raised in this call today.
Okay, thanks so much. I think that's some great stats to leave it on, because I'm afraid we've run out of time today. I hope you have all enjoyed the session and learned something new. I definitely have. So thanks very much to our panelists today, Evelyn Ngatia, Basco Chakravorty, Vivian Dambia, and Isabella Milevska. Thanks so much for sharing your time with us and all these amazing insights. If you've got any questions for our experts, please stay tuned and join us for the live Q&A, which is coming up next.